allowing our attention to gather into this moment, into this place. Taking a couple of deep breaths, followed by long, slow out breaths as we arrive in this space. Grounding ourselves, feeling our feet on the floor, feeling the surfaces we're sitting on. Feeling the support, allowing us to soften and find a sense of ease. Turning our attention to our breathing. Noticing how the in-breath shows up in the body, perhaps the flow of air, or the rising and falling of the chest, expanding and contracting at the belly. Choosing one of those spots to concentrate your attention. Focusing your attention on the act of breathing. Noticing every detail of the in-breath and every detail of the out-breath. And gradually expanding your awareness to a more open noticing and observing of how your mind is behaving at the moment. Considering your mind as a generator of thoughts. just observing the thoughts that your mind generates, noticing how they come and go. You might be aware of the tendency of a given thought to distract us, to take our attention away. You might also notice how once we're distracted by a thought, that thought can arouse emotions. Particularly if it's a thought about the past and there's some regret or excitement. Or if it's a thought about the future and there's some anticipation, or maybe what-ifing. We're merely observers of the thoughts and the emotions they can arouse. And in this observing, we're allowing and accepting the presence of these thoughts and emotions. This is how it is in this moment. By the time we've noticed the thought or the emotion, it's already happened. Allowing and letting go of any attachment to the thought. Any sense of wanting the thought to be a particular way, or even of wanting it to go away. Those are attachments. We've been experiencing random mind. This is how it is. And notice whether it's been a satisfying or dissatisfying experience to be noticing random mind. The essence of mind training is learning to shift from being in this place of being vulnerable to random mind or wandering mind, and instead to having our mind as a resource. As a resource, our minds can liberate us from feeling controlled by the four conditions of being human. They can liberate us from the 3 Ps, from the reality that life is not permanent, not perfect, and not personal. And when we're liberated from the C's and the B's, then we can use mind as a resource for cultivating the 5 characteristics of enoughness. Protecting ourselves, connecting with other beings and life itself, self-regulation, learning, and awareness. Mind training is one of the devices or techniques or approaches that we can use to not making life any harder than it already is. Mind training allows us to feel fully alive and present in each moment. In the meditation, I referred to mind as a thought generator. Some of you may remember that our minds generate about 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And when we're in a random mode, when our minds are just wandering, those 60 to 80,000 thoughts can be very distracting, very seductive, arousing emotions that are unpleasant, leading us into negative ruminations. And yet we resist the opportunity for mind training, even though we're not happy with random mind. In the email I sent out with the quotes from the talk that Kay gave a few years ago on a Sunday morning, there was a reference to the research work that was done with people who were left alone with their thoughts for a few minutes and how unpleasant they felt that to be. So unpleasant that they were more willing to give themselves an unpleasant, really uncomfortable electrical shock than to sit alone with their thoughts. 25% of the women and 2/3 of the men. Maybe we can have a gender exploration one day about that difference. There's also the research, and I'll read here what Kay wrote. The researchers wanted to determine how mind wandering correlated with emotional tone. They created a phone app that would contact people at random intervals throughout their normal day and ask, "What are you doing? How happy do you feel? And are you focusing on what you are doing? If not, is what you are thinking about pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral?" The researchers gathered more than 250,000 samples from around the world, and what they found was that fun activities didn't correlate much with happiness. Instead, what mattered to people was whether they were paying attention to what they were doing. Focused attention was strongly correlated with feeling happy, whereas having a wandering mind was usually accompanied by unpleasant feelings. and wandering mind occurred in about 50% of the samples. When left to its own devices, the human mind is a wandering mind, and this study suggests that a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. So there are many good reasons to train our minds. And as we go through the week, we'll talk about some of those techniques. But I'd like to ask you to just take a moment and reflect on what are some of the ways that you have trained your mind. We all have, to one degree or another, however vulnerable we may be in a given moment to wandering or random mind. We've all found ways to train our minds. And perhaps even mindfulness has played a way in helping you train your mind.